So, as you guys can tell, I have played a lot of the Resident Evil games over the last month or so. I have delved into the world of Resident Evil, starting with Resident Evil 1, and most recently just finishing up Resident Evil 0. I, of course, have not played any of the Resident Evil games before. I don't really know much of the lore aside from the crazy action movies where apparently everyone is set
deep underground in a top secret research lab.
The only lore I know from Resident Evil, aside from common ball knowledge, is Dead by Daylight. Played a lot of Dead by Daylight. I've seen where they added, like Leon, Chris, Jill, Wesker, Nemesis, all of that. So aside from that, I have no knowledge of the universe, of the games, of anything really regarding Resident Evil. So I decided last month to pick it up and give it a shot. So last month, finishing up a couple days ago, I played Resident Evil 1, beat that pretty quick over the course of like a week of streaming, but Resident Evil 0 took a lot longer. However, I never actually gave like an official review at the end of the Resident Evil 1 game. So I wanted to do that as well as include a brief review of Resident Evil 0. So let's go ahead and get into that. Starting with Resident Evil 1, this game, again, I want to go ahead and put out there that I didn't play the originals. I didn't play the original, 1990-something release of Resident Evil. I played the remake, the one that came out for GameCube, I think in like 2002, I think it was. So I'm not going to be comparing it to the original by any means because I don't have experience. I'm not going to talk on something like that, but same thing with Resident Evil 0. Not necessarily a remake, but the HD remaster. I played both of those, the ports to PC, and that's the games I'm going to be talking about. Again, I'm not going to be comparing it to anything else in the Resident Evil franchise because I don't know the ball just yet, but I'm not going to be comparing it to the originals either. I just want to talk about the games itself and what they mean to me. So, starting off with Resident Evil 1, I just did one run through as Chris. I did not do Jill's playthrough. I didn't do like the super hard difficulty. Just one straight run through, experiencing the game, the lore, the story of Chris's side of things, and that's about it. That explains why I beat it so quick. Quick in parentheses. Air quote, sorry. Getting into the game itself took me like 12 hours to beat. But I will say like a solid like 2 to 3 hours of that was me running in circles, not knowing what to do exactly. And that I think is part of the allure of the game is it doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't tell you, hey, to do this, you have to do this. What it does is it lays it out for you and you have to figure it out for yourself. So a big part of the games is to examine every item you pick up. It'll give you a clue, give you a hint, or straight up actually, inform you of how you use the item. Big example of that being keys. Like when you first get the key, you're like, oh, it's some key. But then when you examine it and you turn it, you see the emblem the key is for, and you're like, oh, that's for this. Okay, awesome. So for the first part of the game, I was incredibly stuck. I knew that I needed to use an arrow. I needed to take the tip off the arrow to socket it into a wall, essentially. But I didn't know how to do that. And I swear I examined it, but apparently I didn't examine it at the right angle. So for hours, for like my first playthrough was like 2 hours. For about an hour and a half, I was stuck because I didn't know where to go. So that is something that I know can turn a lot of people off. Not being told what to do, but having to figure it out yourself, regardless of how long it takes. I was one of those people. Chat had to tell me, oh yeah, turn the arrow a little bit and then you'll be able to desocket it. So shout out chat for helping me with that one. But I ended up doing that. The game itself, survival horror, I would say at its finest, and I definitely want to say at its peak from what I've experienced. I haven't delved a lot into survival horror. Games like Alien Isolation, things like that are on my backlog, but for this game, and a game that came out in the early 2000s, the remake at least, phenomenal job. And I think a big part of that is a lot of things that were left out of the original Resident Evil, that were left on the cutting room floor. Things like the backstory of Lisa and her family there and what they went through. That wasn't in the original game after doing a little bit of research after I beat the game. So it adds so much more to the world, to just the lore of Resident Evil, just within the first game. And again, as I mentioned, Wesker is the bad guy. I learned that from Dead by Daylight because he's a killer. People were like, oh, you spoiled yourself for the big reveal at the end of the first game. Well, I mean, the game's been out for like almost 30 years at this point, so whatever, I'll get over it. But moving on, the rest of the game, once I understood how the game played and like what was expected of me, I flew through it. There were a few things that still caught me off guard, a good bit of jump scares, but a couple things like the Crimson Heads. When you kill a zombie and you don't burn it, it has a chance of becoming a Crimson Head, where it's like just a roided out zombie with super long fingernails that can slice you, whatever. I was not aware of that. Apparently, there was a note in a safe room that I completely overlooked. I didn't even see that was a note to read. I didn't find that out until much later. Actually, also had my chat tell me that there was a note. And yeah, so again, the game, it does give you hints, but you have to go out of your way to find them, which again, to some people is a turnoff, but it is what it is. Another thing I originally ragged on the original Resident Evil about when I first started playing it was that it just felt like the game was a series of fetch quest after fetch quest, which, with the loose definition, is true, but appreciating the game and how it goes about doing it is what makes it so memorable for me. So, for example, the first place you're in, the mansion, the first stage of the game, I was there for probably about 6 or 7 out of my 12 hours of playing. You have to come back to the mansion for like a phase 2 at some point, but the first phase of the mansion took me at least 4 to 5 hours, roughly half the game. And in doing so, again, a lot of it was just going back and forth, trying to experiment, not figuring out what it is that you can do. But another part of it was a lot of the backtrack. And the way the game goes about doing the backtracking is so good, in my opinion, because it's not just you're running back somewhere you've already been. There's layers that get added to it. The Crimson Heads that I mentioned, that their dead bodies might just be laying there for a little bit, but then over a certain period of time, boom, they come back. They're just a lot stronger, and you have to go that way. Or another thing, and this is when I experienced early on, is going through a super long hallway, like a hallway that cuts at a 90-degree angle. The first time you go through that hallway, the windows crack. Nothing happens, just windows crack, sound, jump scare, whatever, no big deal. But when you possibly, I don't think it's required, but when you possibly have to come back through that hallway, the window busts open and new enemies spawn in for that instance. So it adds a layer of like uneasiness, like you don't know what to expect, even though you've been down that hallway 3 or 4 times. Same thing with the third-person camera angle, and it's phenomenal the way the game approaches it in such a break from the norm sort of horror aspect. There's for example, there's this one corridor I remember I was in that was like a Z-shaped hallway, with essentially three halls, but they all cut at 90 degrees. So the first time you enter that corridor, you don't know what's on the other side of that hall. So you go down that hall, then the camera swaps to like another corner, and you can see further down that hall, but you can't see what's down the third hall. However, when it flipped to that second camera angle, you could hear zombies. So they're around that third corner, but you can't see them. That adds such a deep layer of dread, especially later game where it's not just zombies you have to contend with. It's spiders, snakes, the Crimson Heads, the hunters, even the abominations in the lab. I don't even know what those were called, but those things freaked me out. But the way the game goes about the horror aspect in survival horror was fantastic. So survival wise, like I only really died 4 or 5 times because I was experimenting with how to kill zombies appropriately, and I wanted to conserve ammo in the beginning. But by my end game, I was so good on ammo. I was like, you know what? I got a shotgun. I got plenty of shells. We're going to take the fight to them, right? So the survival aspect, it was there, because there were a few moments where I was like, oh crap, I'm kind of screwed. But by end game, I was so geared. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to speed run through it with a shotgun, kill anything that walks that ain't me, and be on my way. That may be in part due to the fact I was playing on easy difficulty. Now, granted, I was not playing on the easiest difficulty. I thought I was playing on normal. I thought the difficulty scales were easy, normal, hard, but apparently it was very easy, and normal. So I was still playing on easy, but I digress. Moving on, beating the game, again, just like the deeper lore involved in the game, at least through Chris's playthrough, I'm a lore nerd, right? I love these universes and these like concepts and ideas, so I really enjoyed my time with the lore of the game. But moving on, finishing the game, I still think about it. I beat it over the course of like 4 or 5 days, like a week, but 4 days of actual playing. and I still think about it very often. So for a game that came out in the early 2000s, the remake, I think that's phenomenal. And again, I do intend on going back and playing this game at some point, not only for Jill's playthrough, but also because there's an achievement for beating the game in 3 hours, so I got to get my speedrunning strats down. But that game, phenomenal. Resident Evil Remake, for one, I'm going to give that game a solid 9 out of 10. Not perfect, but definitely a very, very highly regarded game. And of course, that being the only game in the franchise I've played, so far the best. Moving on to Resident Evil 0. The reason I haven't moved on to Resident Evil, 2, 3, the games that came out before 0, is again, I'm playing the remakes. So now that I've beaten 0, I'm going to go and play the Resident Evil 2 remake, then 3 remake, then 4 remake. But 0, I played the HD remaster. Again, the game wasn't remade, it was just, updated visuals, whatever. So because that was a game set right before, literally a day before the events of Resident Evil 1, same core gameplay, I was like, you know what, let's give that a shot. That game, so much different that I was not ready. In terms, again, of the raw gameplay aspect of, solving puzzles, picking up items, using the items, that's the same. You weren't in the mansion for Resident Evil 0. You're in different parts of the world that are close to the mansion, but not there. But the biggest change in the gameplay is you're not just controlling one person, you're controlling two. You're controlling both Rebecca Chambers, who we see in RE1, but you're also controlling Billy Cohen, another dual protagonist. And the game, even though Resident Evil 1 emphasized the horror in the survival horror, Resident Evil 0 by far utilizes the survival element. Not necessarily, hide from everything, because again, you're not really hiding, you're just avoiding things and trying to run by them, but you're not going guns blazing. Mainly because there's two protagonists that have their own separate health pools, but also have their own separate inventories. So if you give Billy a shotgun, but Rebecca has the shotgun ammo, it's useless, vice versa. And there's a lot of gameplay segments where the characters have to split up to solve a puzzle. Like you have to go press 2 buttons at the same time in completely different rooms where bad things can happen. And in this game, it took me roughly 13 hours to beat, so 1 more hour than the standard Resident Evil. Whereas in Resident Evil 1, I died maybe 5 times at the most. In Resident Evil 0, I died a sum total of 40. Not just 4, 40 times. And it was absurd. So there were a few deaths early on, just again, understanding how the game wants me to play it, avoiding some certain zombies and things like that. But there is another big flaw, in my opinion, with the game, is it doesn't hold your hand, but you also don't know what to expect, which is great for, again, the horror, but not so good for the survival. Big example of that is later on in the game, still early, but not super early, but later on in the game, you're in the training facility, you go to solve a puzzle, and a massive centipede monster picks up Rebecca, and you have to utilize Billy, and only Billy, to kill the centipede to save Rebecca. The first time I did that, Rebecca had everything. She had a pistol, she had all the pistol ammo, she had the shotgun, she had all the shotgun ammo, and Billy had a pistol with 1 mag, and he had a Molotov. That was not enough to kill the zombie, so I had to swap to a knife kill the centipede. I had to swap to a knife and spam the heck out of it. Didn't work, Rebecca died, I had to reload my save. But of course, from that point, I understand, okay, I'm going to only be controlling Billy. I need to give him all my weapons and ammo, so he can take out the centipede, save Rebecca, and we can move on. Did it, pretty easy, moved on, no problem. That issue comes up so many times in this game. Not necessarily when they split up, because something I utilized in this game a lot more than RE1 was just straight up running by the enemies, because there's this one leech type enemy that is so insanely hard to kill if you don't have Molotovs, but fairly easy to run by because there's really only one in a room. Just run by it, get to another room, no problem. But with Resident Evil 0, a lot of these boss fights, you are isolated for a lot of it. There was one towards the end of the game. After getting through the training facility before the lab, you're in a church. And I don't know if it's required if you have to have Billy stand on the plate and only Rebecca go in, but that's what I did. The door was locked, Billy had to stand on a pressure plate, Rebecca walked in the room into the church, found a save point, I saved. However, coming out of that save room, there was a massive mutated bat type monster, and you had to fight it as Rebecca. Now in the save room, it gives you access to napalm grenades for a grenade launcher, and it also gives you shotgun ammo. Thankfully, at that time, Rebecca had the grenade launcher, but she did not have the shotgun. And with aiming in this game, it's a little bit wonky. So like, if you click left trigger, I'm playing on controller. If you click left trigger, then it'll kind of snap aim to it. But the way the monster moves, you don't always hit your shots. So I burned through the grenades, missing a lot. I didn't have the shotgun, so I was forced to use the starter pistol, which was not very good. I died, had to reload the save, but the issue was because I saved after splitting them up, and I refused to backtrack super far to redo it. It was a lot of trial and error until I eventually killed the bat and moved on. But once again, this issue persists in the last third of the game, or maybe the last fourth of the game. It is a big issue because Billy is not present. Billy gets taken out and he's unavailable for a major length of the game once you're reaching the end game point. He comes back for the final boss fight and everything's okay, but for a lot of time, he's not there. And while he's not there, anything in his inventory is also not available. So, for example, one of the things Rebecca has to do solo is she has to fight a tyrant, which is first seen in the first Resident Evil. The boss fight itself wasn't that hard, especially once understood the mechanics and how to dodge his attacks and counterattack. But again, the problem is before that boss fight, you are given grenade launcher ammo because the game wants to help you defeat this monster. Billy had the grenade launcher, and I didn't have access to the grenade launcher for pretty much the last quarter of the game up until the last boss fight. So I had to take out the tyrant with a newly acquired Magnum, which was a great help, but also, again, just the starter pistol, because Billy also had the shotgun. So for a lot of that segment of the game, I was at such a disadvantage when it came to having to fight these monsters because I didn't have the appropriate tools. Again, me being stubborn, I wasn't going to reload an old save to do all of that backtracking to get it done. The game is a little bit different from Resident Evil 1, to whereas you couldn't drop items in RE1, you had to stash, the safe boxes or whatever. Resident Evil 0, you don't have safe boxes, but you can freely drop items on the ground. And again, that adds a layer to the backtracking that towards the end game I got a little annoyed with, because in the very beginning, you're given access to a grapple launcher to get up to the roof of a train. And you use it there, and that's pretty much it for the first 3 to 4 hours of the game. You don't use the grapple launcher again. So I dropped the grapple launcher, didn't intend to use it. You get to the church, you have to grapple your way up to the roof to open up a door to get further. So I'm like, okay, I go back, grab the grapple launcher, use it, and then I loop back into the church where the safe room is, and I drop the grapple launcher because I'm like, you know what? I don't think we're going to need to use this again. So I go through not even any real fights or anything, but I go through 3 separate loading screens, get into another room where it's hey, you have to have the grapple launcher. So I have to backtrack all these rooms, get the grapple launcher, go right back in, and continue. And again, by that point, I was just a little aggravated because the game doesn't tell you. The game doesn't hold your hand. It still has things where oh, hey, this key is useless, you can discard it, but the grapple launcher, you don't discard. It doesn't tell you still need to use it. It doesn't tell you don't need to use it. So that was a little aggravating. But aside from, again, the inventory mismanagement and not knowing what to expect, as I mentioned before, the characters have 2 separate health pools. So a lot of the game, I found myself going through a corridor as Billy, either clearing it out or running around the enemies, and then swapping to Rebecca to do the same. Because if you both go into a room and you try to run away, your AI, even though you have it demanded to follow you, if it gets into a fight, it's not following. It's just going to stay there and fight, which is another way I died sometimes, and that was a little annoying. But all in all, getting through the game, in so many save instances, I pretty much soft-locked myself because they were so weak, and I had to do a lot of experimenting, which led to the 40 deaths. But I still enjoy the game as a whole. It wasn't as fun as RE1 because of a lot of, not save scumming, but just retrying and backtracking and everything I didn't have to do in the first game. I would honestly give Resident Evil 0 a 7 out of 10. Again, I would not say anywhere as good as the first game, but the lore that it added, as well as just more of a backstory on Rebecca and Billy, was great. Now, because these games are literally set a day apart, although the prequel came later in the chronological order of release, there are some consistency issues, and I want to address those real quick. Not, not anything big or crazy, but there's two major ones that stood out to me. At the end of Resident Evil 0, Billy departs. He leaves. He's like, okay, I'm out of here. Peace out. He's not seen in Resident Evil 1, and I don't believe he's seen in any other Resident Evil game, period. But Billy leaves. Rebecca takes his dog tags to remember him by. She puts his dog tag around his neck. Her character model in RE1 does not have the dog tags. So that's something super minor, but something I realized. But the biggest one is in RE1, in the Chris playthrough that I experienced, you have to have Rebecca help you with something. You find her, you save her, but you need her help. She essentially has to play, I believe it's the Moonlight Serenade on piano. You have to have her play it because Chris can't play the piano. She plays it well. It opens up, a secret corridor. You move on. In Resident Evil 0, there's a similar type puzzle to where there is a piano that reveals a hidden passageway. You try to play it as Rebecca, and Rebecca messes up bad. You have to have Billy play the piano to open the door, which long term doesn't really make sense. I don't see why it couldn't have been the other way around, have Billy mess up and have Rebecca open the door. But that's just a weird consistency issue where Rebecca in RE1, literally not even 24 hours later, she's able to play the piano, no problem. But the day before, she's struggling. And it's not mentioned at all that Billy helps her or anything. So it's something that also stood out to me as kind of weird. But again, it's not game breaking. It's not, lore breaking. It is what it is, just a minor inconsistency. But again, all in all, Resident Evil 0, I did enjoy it. Once Billy got back, I had, so much ammo for the grenade launcher that the last boss fights weren't even remotely hard. I had both of them. The game geared you for a boss fight by giving you a ton of meds to heal yourself and even extra to heal yourself mid-boss fight. I did it. I flew through it. So the game itself was still fun, but it was a lot more difficult and put a lot more emphasis on survival compared to RE1. But both of them combined, over the last month or so, I had such a blast playing this game, both of the games, and I'm so excited to finally get to RE2 to again proceed then to 3 and 4 so I can play as Leon, because Leon apparently is Mr. Aura Farm himself, and I'm so excited to experience it firsthand for the first time ever. But I just wanted to give you guys my thoughts on the original games that I've played so far, and hopefully we'll be able to get the rest of the YouTube videos out soon. If you guys, you've seen on the channel, I have the full VODs of me playing on stream, but I'm trying to chop them up into smaller pieces just for easier access of viewing, so you don't feel overwhelmed by watching a whole 4-hour video at once or having to come back to it. So I'm trying to break it up into like 20-30 minutes, finding a good save, like a stopping point, like at a save or something. But that's taking a lot of time and a lot of editing, mainly because, especially with RE1, there was an audio issue with stream to where like the audio in game sounds so garbled. I mean, my mic sounds perfectly fine, but I've been having to edit that as well using my software, and it takes a lot of time, mainly because I have to go back and watch the entire thing to make sure those audio issues don't persist, and it takes a lot of time. And I'm not saying like it takes a lot of time. Please watch my video, all of that. I don't care, but I want to put out good quality content. Maybe not the best quality because my perfectionist self won't ever have the best, but I want it to still be somewhat watchable, and again, in a good time period, not 4 hours, but like 20-30 minutes. So I'm taking a lot of time trying to do that, even on top of still playing these games, doing other things, working a job and all of that. So I apologize that the upload schedule isn't really good, or there's not really any sort of schedule just yet. But again, if you guys really want to go ahead and watch everything and get caught up before those videos come out, I have all the stream VODs, so feel free to knock yourself out. But with that being said, just wanted to give my thoughts, my opinions on the Resident Evil games I've played so far. Again, this is probably the longest yapping session I've had. I don't know how long we've gone, but it feels like it's been about a good 15-20 minutes. But that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk to you guys about, was just me playing the games, my experience, my thought, my review. But that's about it for me today. Just remember before we head out that I appreciate you guys so much. You stuck till the end listening to me yap about a couple video games I played that I just haven't gotten to for 30 years. I greatly appreciate you guys, and that's about it. But just remember, I love you. God loves you. Peace out.